Guys, welcome to another Sales Wisdom Pods. Today with us, we have Garth Moulton. He's Jigsaw's co-founder. We're going to talk about exits. We're going to talk about SaaS. We're going to talk about the GTM fund, which I already interviewed a couple of folks, and Pipel, a bunch of other things in between. It's going to be exciting. Garth, can you briefly introduce yourself and tell us about Jigsaw?
Sure. I'm Garth Moulton. I would say my 15 minutes of internet fame, if I had it, was I co-founded Jigsaw, which was a data company that we went through 3 rounds of funding in Silicon Valley and sold to Salesforce in 2010. Since then, I founded another company here in Charlotte. I now live in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was called Other Screen. It was a second screen, people on their phones and they're using their iPads while they watch television. We were trying to join the experience. We had some nice progress, but ultimately we were unsuccessful. And then I've worked since then. I've worked for several companies back in this sort of business intelligence, business contact, ad tech, ABM space, including a 7-year stint at People, which is PIPL.com. It's a 20-year-old, approaching 20-year-old search engine data aggregator. And then for the last year, I have been SVP of membership for 5x5, which is the data co-op. We've got over 100 companies, all platforms, companies that either are data companies or use data about people to run their business and to help their customers. And we're having a wonderful experience with that, taking on new members and processing more and more data. We're up to over 100 billion data signals a day that we're processing in building products. So it's going back to the kind of web generated or user generated content world that I was thrust into when we co-founded Jigsaw.
So what was your vision back then? You've been in data for quite a while with Jigsaw. You've always been community-centered as well. I guess you've made plans and had visions back then, and that lasts still up to this day. So what were these theses of yours of regarding data, regarding community, and where you wanted to take your career?
Well, yeah, I mean, Jigsaw, it really was the brainchild of my co-founder, Jim Fowler. We were both enterprise software sales people. We were actually working for an email service. You'd call it an email service platform now. It was called Digital Impact, which had gone public in the tech boom and is now and has been for many years part of Axiom. But at any rate, we wanted to found a company, and we realized that that one of the glaring needs for salespeople, this is before LinkedIn had really propagated, and we realized that enterprise sales guys spent a lot of their time just trying to figure out contact information. And then we had both read NetGain, and I had actually had some experience working at an online community related to IT before that, and we certainly realized the power of the internet, if you will, which sounds quaint at this point, but this was 20 years ago, to help generate content, in this case contact information for it's interesting to note that we thought that this type of data, just knowing that Garth Moulton's phone number is X and his business email is Y, we thought that that information was going to be immediately commoditized. And we were like, the days of companies charging or licensing this type of information will be over. very, very soon. In fact, we were, and we were always looking forward to what types of strategic data and attached data that we could provide, so we could provide value and can continue to kind of ride the wave. Well, here we are 20 years later, and there are still companies that are making an extraordinarily good living, essentially just licensing this contact information for use in marketing programs and et cetera. And here I am at 5x5, continuing to try to commoditize that data. I mean, we feel like we can, by gathering the data from all the different companies, and then receiving it from the bid stream and public records and things like that, we think that we ultimately will be able to effectively commoditize this data, and certainly make it more accurate and more efficient. And then so other companies will have to provide a sliver of value on top of that data. So in a way, I'm at this a very similar mission that we were on in 2003 when we founded Jigsaw.
Right. And which is interesting. It's, yeah, you've ran the marathon and haven't stopped till then. And it's also interesting to think about that vision, that hypothesis that contact information is going to be free and so forth. I'm not sure how you got to that, but certainly there were yellow pages back in the days. People nowadays are kind of changing information quite a lot with layoffs, or just like having multiple mailboxes and so forth. We're seeing big companies such as ZoomInfo and upcoming ones like Apollo still go after that market. And yeah, these are huge companies. I think one of the problem with these companies is that people want to retain their information more and more. There's bad actors that can do bad things with this information. What do you have to say about the legal and the ethical side of things of these companies?
Well, first of all, I will definitely agree. There are companies, very good companies, that are making very good money and growing very quickly, and in that industry, providing that sort of that original business problem, if you will, of trying to keep up to date with B2B information. It's whereas people's cell phone, by and large, is not changing very quickly. And a lot of times their personal email will remain constant, because it's, quite frankly, it's just a pain in the ass to change those things.
Right.
Your business ID, your business email is always changing, and then your title, and as companies consolidate, and and then as you change jobs, it's so that's sort of the problem to be to be solved. Now, as far as like the ethics behind, you mentioned people wanting to take control of their data. Well, I would argue that for years, do you own your, the fact that, you work at such and such company, and then that your business email is you can try to fight that wave, but in actuality, it's I would argue that now, things like your social security number and certainly medical information and other types of things, I think that those are yours, and those are yours to be protected, and et cetera. But sort of just matter of fact contact details, I think that the ship has sailed, so to speak. So
Right.
so I think that, I mean, to the extent that you can make your preferences known, I think that that's a great thing. And you can always set up your spam filters, and you can choose what you react to, and you can choose how your data gets out there. But the very, very basics, I really don't feel like have changed that much.
Right. No, that's I mean, and every time I ask that question to business people, like, we all have the same opinion, right? But consumers, they think so differently. They think more emotionally, and they have different conceptions. For example, if I had this phone number to get on calls with my family, and I don't want to be disrupted. But I do think there's like hard technical solutions to these problems, spam filter being one, or Apple just blocking phone numbers that you don't want calling you, for example. Yes, and I believe that social security numbers is really much outdated technology, right? I think it needs an update for health records for sure, and especially if people could abuse of those. I don't know, like put if you're allergic to peanuts, well, put some kind of peanuts in your food to if they're really evil, for example. And yeah, I think blockchain could help to kind of or crypto to kind of blur this information and make it more private and unlock it with biometrics and so forth. But yeah, certainly an interesting convo. I want to pick this up with one of the roles that you occupied 1 year ago, because you were SVP at PayPal for 7 years, from 2015 to 2022. I remember using PayPal myself back in days in which I would work for realtors to find information of people that would actually sell their houses, or investors, for example. And PayPal was the only tool doing that. And I think PayPal kind of pivoted a couple of times its business model, maybe because, I don't know, maybe because it was getting into trouble with like finding anyone's information and so forth, or people complaining. Now it seems that the value prop is turn a single data point into a trusted identity. So it's like validating people's identity. While me, back in the days, I was using it to actually prospect these folks. And yeah, PayPal was this really beautiful solution, elegant solution, and certainly the only one back in my days. So tell us about the insights and what you developed, what you built at PayPal as SVP.
Well, your initial point that it's actually pronounced people, but don't worry.
We used to pronounce PayPal like, yeah, all of in Quebec, there was PayPal.
Yeah, very true. And I also, you also hear Pipple and PIPL.com, and so it's they're used to it, but they actually say it people.com. Okay. You are absolutely correct in that it has, as I said, I believe it was founded in 2005. And I know because they were a very early partner of ours at Jigsaw. They would drive traffic, and in return, we would allow them to scan the company data and some other elements of our data so they could make it available, because they were a search engine, and it was just a search engine. And their business model was, based on sort of ad revenue, or also they would drive traffic to various other sites. And I think over the years, in fact, when I decided to come on, they had pivoted in that they realized they were a lot better at data than they were at marketing, so to speak. So they started to make out of some of their competitors, they made partners. They were just like, we'll handle the data aspect of it, and and you will license the data from us. But they still had the consumer search engine. And then while I was there, we made the decision to close the consumer, because it just opened it up for abuse, because it's like, just like the good guys could use it, the bad guys could use it, to gather information, and enough information to fool, know your customer and other types of systems. So we shut that down and made it only available to other platforms, and and specifically fraud management teams, and so they could look up both sides of a transaction and see if it made sense. And then there was a further pivot last year, which actually precipitated my exit from the company, in that no longer focusing on providing information to sales and marketing companies, and and going more into the identity identity trust. Is this a trusted identity? And which is great. I think it makes a ton of sense, and it's moving more towards what you alluded to. People attempting to take control of their data, and helping you. And their tagline was changed to helping to, and I'm mauling it, but disallow other folks trying to pretend to be you, essentially, and which I think which makes a ton of sense, and
Yeah.
I think that they will ultimately be successful. I mean, they remain extraordinarily good at processing lots of data, that is gleaned from the internet and public sources, and being extraordinarily good using AI before it was trendy, to learn and to ascertain if different attributes of identity are legitimate, and provide that for the powers of good, for
Right.
fraud prevention and for anti-money laundering and know your customer, and things like that.
Right. One startling point here is that when you start companies and build great products, and these products are used by multiple people, and you somewhat get viral and have scale enter the equation, there comes the bad actors, there comes the humongous responsibility. I can certainly think of parallels with Google, or terrorists using Facebook live feed to show
Absolutely.
executions and so forth. It's so hard. You have so much responsibility in your hands as a founder. I mean, you've managed communities yourself, but these are
Yes.
micro communities that you control. But still, you every now and then you might have had actors that are not adding value to the ecosystem.
Oh
What
my
do you do
God.
in that case?
That was absolutely just absolutely core to the experience at Jigsaw. Because we were founded by two sales guys, and we cobbled together that first website, and that's what it was. It was a website, and it became a continual arms race or game of whack-a-mole. It's like there were constantly people trying to break it, trying to and we used to laugh though, because although we had an elaborate point system and there was a value system, we were just like, okay, one weekend I remember over Memorial Day of our second year, we pretty much after the fact figured out that somewhere in India, we think they got something like 500 people in a room, and they all pounded. They used the fact that you could join and you would get some points, for referring others, and they were sort of referring each other and then gaining the points, and then they were starting to make bad changes to data, and so they were accruing points. But the joke was really on them, because you're like, okay, like all these fraudulent accounts that we figured out after the fact, on Monday, and or I guess on Tuesday, because it was Memorial Day weekend. But on Tuesday we figured it all out. We blocked all the accounts, and all they really did was they got away with a bunch of data. They got away with a bunch of, think of it as a bunch of virtual business cards. And so I used to use the analogy all the time, was like, they broke into our pool over the weekend and swam for free. And so we were like,
And shit
okay,
in the
that's
pool.
great, as long as you didn't go in and deface the pool and pee in the pool and graffiti it up. That's how you could quote unquote hurt us. But they weren't able to steal money, or get things from credit cards or things like that, which was good.
Right.
But no,
Especially.
and then throughout our existence, we were constantly plugging holes. Right in the beginning, somebody came on and put an S on the end of the name of thousands of contacts, and then it was a hole. I mean, it was and we really were just learning by doing. But I use the arms race, because it's just a constant. It's like anti-money laundering. It's just a constant, like, people trying to figure out ways, and security in general. It's people trying to figure out ways to get around the system, and then you trying to figure out ways to plug the system.
Yeah, and I think the right psychology on how to approach that is that these guys, they actually add value. They're kind of free pen testers, as long as they don't checkmate your company, which is kind of hard, but which has happened, right? Hackers that
Sure.
got away with like full companies, and they have like $80 million a hole when they kind of fix the hack, or they just destroy everything. As long as they don't hard checkmate you, it's mostly value, because it prepares you for the next bad guy, and it also provides you ideas on what could happen next, which is huge responsibility, I guess. How did you deal with it psychologically?
Well, one of the things that we turned the community into watchdogs, and some of them we had to kind of back down. You know, they became a little overzealous, but we were very pleasantly surprised by the people that we were able to instill a sense of, this is all of our data. You know, this is all of our this is all of our community. You know, and we develop systems for, you know, for flagging, you know, bad, you know, content or bad actors, and then we could apply humans to it, or excuse me, we could apply actual employees to it. So that's what came out. You know, as far as the psychology, ultimately, it really reinforced, you know, just an opinion that we had, that most people are good, and most people want to do good. And in fact, it's a very, 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 very tiny minority, you know, that wants to not do well. And that was reinforced almost continually. Now, I will note that once Salesforce bought us, they didn't really understand, or they weren't set up to nurture the community, you know, and I think that they had almost immediate more problems with fraud, and with, you know, because then it was seen as the big corporation, you know, that had taken over this sort of little community that could. And I think that they experienced, you know, and ultimately it was an unsuccessful integration, you know, because they integrated into something called data.com, which I think was very valuable. You know, they put some other more corporate information, and it was more of an overlay into the CRM of Salesforce. And I think it made sense. But ultimately, you know, it was a bit of a liability, I think, for Salesforce, that wasn't worth it in their, you know, grand designs of, you know, business. You know, it's like, I used to say at Jigsaw, we were in the shallow water of privacy. You know, it's like, we didn't want to get sucked out into the deep waters, but we were able to be in the shallow water. And for a big company like Salesforce, they can't be in the shallow water. They can't be in the water of privacy concerns and things like that.
Right. So fascinating, because yeah, these companies, they might acquire 10 and have one major success. So I guess that's part of the game. Salesforce has always been community oriented,
Yes.
which is kind of surprising, but yeah, I guess it's like technical details in there, and it's I guess they kind of salvage parts of it. But it's so fascinating that you've been leading communities for quite a while, and that, I mean, humanity was built on communities, you know, tribalism and so forth. I guess you've read lots of books on the topic. I guess you've got lots of insights on human nature, other than, let's call them the 99.9% goods via the 0.1% bads. What else have you learned on human nature, and how do you make communities successful, especially based with your background in history? I'm guessing you must have analyzed civilizations and communities before. Tell us what you've learned, and how to manage a community to where it needs to go, aka growth.
Well, I mean, I'd love to list out some erudite, you know, observations based in historical example. I was actually a history major at Brown, but I may disappoint you. But another observation that is related to the people being good um, was we needed to we learned very early to resist the urge to put a bunch of rules in place, and rules with penalties. And instead we were just like, okay, this is how we're going to we're going to trust you, and it's like, and when we would find bad actors or people doing what we considered bad things or detrimental things, we would contact them personally. And I think they were always shocked. I used to use the analogy of it's like we had the first Home Depot, when like people were used to little hardware stores, and then they go into a Home Depot, and you're like, nobody's watching me. It's like I can put this in my pocket, and if nobody really, there's nobody there to say. And so what we would do is just kind of, I would sometimes, a lot of times it was me, I would personally contact these people, and they'd be like, and I'd be like, hey, and I'm like, we noticed that, you got a whole bunch of these contacts, and you're putting some contacts in, and they don't seem to really be that updated, or there's spelling mistakes, or they're it's there's sort of a hole in this, there's nothing in the system that's going to automatically correct us and like be bad to you. And they would, again, by far the majority of the time, they would be like amazed that I took the time to contact them, totally give them the benefit of the doubt. And then a lot of these people would turn into, I mean, from casual, just sort of like, hey, what can I get out of this thing, to dyed in the wool Jigsaw like fans that would talk about us, and they were, and a lot of it stemmed from just extending some trust, extending some trust to them, and not giving into the urge to be like, these are the rules and this is what happens if you get, and trying to think of all the permutations, because you can't think of all the permutations of all the, but if you just sort of let the water find the holes, and then then do something for the holes, it was a much better way to move forward.
Well, that's fascinating. You really motivated me to do my community, to start it and see where that can lead today. So thank you for that, Garth. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Garth Moulton. Most people don't know tons of Garths, but I think I'm pretty easy to find. And of course, I've since the Jigsaw days, my contact information is pretty freely available. Like if I don't want you contacting me, I know how to get away from you. So yeah, I think I am. I'm pretty approachable, and I'm pretty easy to get in contact with.